Gambino Associate James Jimmy Hydell is probably most famous for being brutally tortured and murdered by mobster Anthony Gaspipe Casso, after Hydell had been part of a hit squad that tried, and failed, to kill the future Lucchese family underboss. But what is rarely discussed is how Hydell was involved in the murder of one of his own ex-girlfriends in horrendous fashion. Let's check it out. Welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, we're going to take a quick look at vicious Gambino Family associate James Jimmy Hydell and his involvement in the murder of his ex-girlfriend Annette DiBiase. On April the 30th, 1986, 27-year-old Annette DiBiase, a secretary receptionist, was walking to work at the office of Home Buyers Service Incorporated on 86th Street in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, when, at 9:35 a.m, a red car with a white top pulled up. Two men grabbed DiBiase and pushed her into the vehicle. One newspaper reported of the kidnapping. She was apparently abducted against her will and forced into a car, said Detective Timothy Dowd of the Bath Avenue Station House. The grab occurred Wednesday morning on Bay 7th Street near 86th Street as DiBiase neared her office on 86th Street. The car sped away on 86th, witnesses said. Across the street from DiBiase's office, a bomb exploded April the 13th under the auto of Gambino underboss Frank DeCicco, killing him and seriously injuring a second man. Annette DiBiase lived with her widowed mother in a home that was only 300 feet from where she worked. A month went by and there was still no sign of DiBiase, either dead or alive. Her desperate family put forward a reward for any knowledge relating to Annette's disappearance, as can be seen in the following newspaper. 2G for info in kidnapping. The family of a 27-year-old Brooklyn woman is offering a $2,000 reward for information about her abduction from a Bensonhurst Street, April the 30th, while she walked the 300 feet from her home to her office. Detectives at the Bath Avenue station said they have few clues in the disappearance of Annette DiBiase, a secretary receptionist, and that the family is offering the reward in the hope it will help stir the case. Despite detectives stating that they had few clues in the disappearance, almost immediately they focused their attention on one individual as a suspect. It was reported, the man cops seek to question is believed to be the same person arrested in December in an assault on DiBiase, but a Staten Island grand jury last week refused to indict him on this count. Another paper stated, police said they want to question DiBiase's former boyfriend. Cops said the former boyfriend is the nephew of a reputed mobster. Although not identified, this man was Gambino associate James Jimmy Hydell, the nephew of Gambino family captain Daniel Marino. It wasn't until nearly a year later, on February the 24th, 1987, when the body of Annette DiBiase was found, buried in a shallow grave on Staten Island. It was reported, a nude, badly decomposed body, believed to be that of DiBiase, was found Tuesday afternoon in a shallow grave in woods off Sharretts Road, near a service road of the West Shore Expressway on Staten Island. The location of DiBiase's body was hard for Detective Albert Guarneri to take. He said, I lived and breathed this case, Guarneri said. Now I feel sick and relieved. They buried her 0.6 of a mile from my home. The way this was done could make a guy paranoid. So, why was Annette DiBiase killed? And who was responsible? With regards to the kidnapping of Annette DiBiase, the police had long suspected the involvement of Gambino associate Jimmy Hydell and his gang, which included former Transit Authority police officer Robert Bering. Throughout 1986, The authorities had been focusing their attention on Hydell and his associates, who the police believe were responsible for at least 10 murders, as well as being involved in major drug deals, truck hijackings, and auto theft. Jimmy Hydell, although in his 20s, had earned a reputation across the underworld for being tough, violent, and dangerous. As mentioned, Robert Baring, a gang associate of Hydell's, was a former Transit Authority police officer. Baring had joined the Transit Authority force in 1965 and retired in 1972 on a disability not related to his job. After retiring from the police force, Robert Baring would eventually forge a career in the criminal underworld and was, along with James Hydell, believed to have been involved in 2 murders in 1986. That of Giacomo Jack D'Angelo, an alleged Gambino family soldier, and also Joseph Trinetto, a man who had been living with Robert Baring's former wife. But it was Heidel and Baring's involvement in a famous mob hit, albeit a failed one, that would eventually break open the case regarding what happened to Annette DiBiase. Feared Gambino mobster Michael Mickey Boy Paradiso approached Jimmy Hydell and gave him the contract to whack Lucchese mobster Anthony Gaspipe Casso. The reasons for this hit are open for debate, but most believe it was regarding a dispute that Gambino mobsters Angelo Ruggiero and Michael Paradiso were having with Anthony Casso over a drug deal. I won't go into too much detail regarding this famous mob incident, but ultimately the hit squad comprising of James Hydell, Robert Baring and Nicky Guido failed to kill Anthony Casso, merely wounding the Lucchese mobster. And whilst recovering from his injuries, Gaspipe Casso set about trying to track down those who had tried to kill him. Meanwhile, Jimmy Hydell was having further problems from the police, who were trying to gather evidence against him relating to the disappearance of his ex-girlfriend Annette DiBiase. The authorities even tried to get Philip Paradiso, brother of the fearsome Mickey Boy Paradiso, to wear a wire to get Heidel to admit his role in the kidnapping of his ex-girlfriend. Philip Paradiso was a drug addict, and he even once wore a wire to record his Gambino mobster brother Mickey Boy talking about criminal activities. However, Philip Paradiso was unable to record James Hydell discussing Annette DiBiase's disappearance. Shortly after this, Jimmy Hydell was then famously grabbed by corrupt mafia cops Stephen Carracapa and Louis Eppolito and delivered to Anthony Casso, the man that he had recently tried to kill. And as most of you are aware, Anthony Casso would then torture and murder Jimmy Hydell. Allegedly, the kidnapped Hydell, knowing that he was about to die, made one final request to Anthony Casso. "I know you're going to kill me. Just do one thing for me. I have a life insurance. It isn't much, but it's all I've got. Will you put my body in the street so it can be found, and my mother can collect the life insurance?" Casso responded, "Don't worry about it. I'll do that." Anthony Casso wasn't a man of his word, and Jimmy Hydell's body has never been found. So, coming towards the end of 1986, and with James Hydell, the prime suspect in the DiBiase kidnapping, now missing, the authorities feared that they might never find out what happened to Annette DiBiase and where her body might be buried. However, as I previously mentioned, Anthony Casso murdering James Hydell would eventually lead to the discovery of Annette DiBiase's corpse. After Heidel, Nicky Guido and Robert Baring had botched the Casso hit, Nicky Guido initially hid at his mother's house, and Robert Baring went to Long Island and laid low. And after Casso had eliminated James Hydell, he decided to go after Nicky Guido and Robert Baring. Casso had been provided information by corrupt cops Carracapa and Eppolito that Robert Baring lived on Daffodil Lane on Staten Island. But when Casso scoped out the location, Robert Baring was in the wind. Tragically, in Casso's attempts to then get Nicky Guido, his men ended up killing an innocent man who shared the same name, as I've covered in a previous video. The real Nicky Guido then took off for Tampa, Florida. Hiding out in Long Island, Robert Baring saw on the news that a Nicholas Guido had been murdered, but there was no photo of the victim. Baring assumed that Casso had caught up with Guido, just as he had done with Jimmy Hydell. And so, fearing for his life, on January the 3rd, 1987, just over a week since the innocent Nicholas Guido was shot by Casso's man Joey Testa, former cop turned criminal Robert Baring met with George Terra of the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office and became a government witness. Robert Baring told the authorities about the failed hit on Anthony Casso, but more importantly, he told them about the kidnapping and murder of 27-year-old Annette DiBiase. As the excellent book The Brotherhoods by Guy Lawson and William Oldham writes, Hydell and Baring snatched her as she walked out the door of her house. DiBiase was a nice girl from all reports, caught up with the wrong guy. Heidel raped her in the van. Then he and Baring wrapped her body in a tarp, naked and alive, and drove to a wooded area near the Richmond Parkway on Staten Island. Heidel had already dug a grave in the woods. As they were carrying her into the forest, Baring slipped, and she rolled out of the tarpaulin. Heidel sent Baring back to the car and dumped her in the grave, where he shot her 5 times with a .22. Heidel cut up her clothes and credit cards and wallet with scissors and tossed them out of the window of the van as they drove along the Jersey Turnpike. Robert Baring's information led the authorities to discover Annette DiBiase's body in a wooded area near the West Shore Expressway on Staten Island. Robert Baring was sentenced to 15 years to life for a multitude of crimes, including murder. He died in prison of a heart attack on the 2nd of May 1995, 5 years short of his release. But all of this leaves the question, why was 27-year-old Annette DiBiase murdered by Heidel and Baring? Some sources suggest that Heidel discovered that DiBiase had been having an affair with a married man, and this led to him killing her. However, most reports state that DiBiase and Heidel were no longer a couple at the time that he kidnapped her. In fact, Heidel had assaulted DiBiase previously in December 1985. Perhaps this led to their breakup. And it was this assault that led to Annette DiBiase testifying about James Hydell in court. As one newspaper reports, DiBiase was slain 2 days after she testified before a Staten Island grand jury in an assault case against suspected gang member James Hydell, her ex-boyfriend. Police theorized she was killed because she had knowledge of the gang's activities and members feared she would testify against them. Either way, some solace can be taken from the fact that Annette DiBiase's mother was eventually able to bury her daughter. And this was something that Jimmy Hydell's mother Betty was never able to do with her murderous son, whose remains have never been found. And in 1998, Betty Hydell would lose another son, Frank, who was also murdered. But that's a story for another day. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.